Good evening, my brothers and sisters. Good afternoon, good morning, good day, good whatever it is, wherever you are all around this fragile blue planet. This is Dave once again from the Studio Den. I'm here today with the Freedom Study Group, and today your beloved host is the one, the only, the fabulous Saban Salisi, and her guest star from the GTEN organization. And my dear, take it away.
All right, well, thank you for that lovely intro. Wolf Spirit. Everybody, as he said, this is the Freedom Study Group radio show on Wolf Spirit Radio. Welcome. I'm your host, Humanity Transcending. I thank you for joining me this Thursday, April 30th, 2013. With me today, as Dave said, is PJ and Christian of GTEN, Global Trust Education Network. This is part 2, a continuation of our previous interview and discussion last week on Revolution Radio, of which you can find the archive for that on the Revolution Radio YouTube channel. Just type in Humanity Transcending and April 25th, 2013. We will get a show description up there soon, and you'll be able to listen into part 1 of the first part of our show. So we're here today to continue the important discussion. All right, so we're going to be discussing, among other things, distinctions between operating in the public versus operating in the private, what acts we perform that make us subject to the jurisdiction of the corporate United States, and ways by which we may free ourselves from this control over many aspects of our lives. A lot of us are caring about our rights. A lot of us are having a renewed curiosity of what it takes to live free. We realize that many aspects of our lives have been under the thumb of the corporate government. And so in this awakening, now a lot of us are looking for ways to live more freely, to not be under the jurisdiction of this corporate government. So GTEN is going to be talking to us about these issues and offering us some real tangible ways to break out of this kind of slavery that we find ourselves in. So a little bit about GTEN, and then I'm going to turn it over to them. GTEN is a private, not-for-profit trust organization comprised of a network of individuals serving the common good through trusteeship of private and charitable trusts, organized for educational, literary, scientific, and spiritual purposes, to lessen the burden of governments, to defend and promote rights and freedom, and to actively assist in the sound, sustainable, enlightened evolution of mankind for a world that works for all life. G10.org members learn the methods, principles, trust structures, and operating tools for profound transformation of the ways in which they operate both individually and for the collective good. By functioning effectively in trust, empowered with conscious creation and unalienable rights, secure in the only truly private form of organization for asset protection, our members create a legacy of freedom and opportunity. Very, very exciting work that these guys are up to. So welcome, PJ and Christian. Why don't you guys tell us a little bit about who you are and what you guys are doing?
All right. Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Siobhan. Greetings.
Yes, you guys are so welcome. I'm very glad to have you back for part 2.
Yeah, we enjoyed the first half. It was a lot of fun. We really enjoyed our last conversation. I think this one's going to be just as much fun.
Yeah.
So that was a great opening as to who we are, and what we do is we look to empower individuals with the information needed to, as you said, enlighten ourselves and understand what kind of system we're operating in. So
we chose to create GTEN in order to educate individuals in how to set up and operate private express trusts under their unalienable rights, as opposed to using the artificial person, the all caps name, or a corporation, LLC, which also falls under a federal jurisdiction like the all caps name does. So I guess what it comes down to is that everyone talks about what John Rockefeller said, that the secret is to own nothing but control everything, right? And he's absolutely right. So what we share with our members is how to do it, how to actually do that, how to live that way, how to lawfully, practically structure your life and business so that you're in control and no longer using the all caps name. That person subjects you to the United States under the pretense of ownership. So in my opinion, it's the right way to function for anyone looking to create something of real value for the world, because you can't actually own anything anyway. We share our time on this planet as a usufruct. All right, we can learn to control things correctly, but we can't actually own anything. And we don't. We don't own anything. It's all on loan from the Creator. So the issue, as we see it, is that most people haven't learned to control anything. They keep giving up control to the governments, etc., who in turn control it for the international bankers. It's well enough that people of the nation don't understand our banking and monetary system. This is a Henry Ford quote. Well enough that people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system. For if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning. Henry Ford said that in 1922.
That's the truth. So what we're talking about is we're looking to empower individuals with the knowledge that they need to make the proper decisions in the public and in the private. And we look, like Christian said, to establish your own private entity outside of the character of the person, so to speak, or the taxpayer identification number, or any of those items. So, we are endowed with unalienable rights. The right of locomotion, the right of personal liberty, the right to contract. And the right to contract is the most powerful right that we have. And derived from that is that's where we derive our power in these private trusts, is from our own unalienable rights. They are not chartered by any organization. These are not privileges or benefits that are issued by any private organization. These are granted from the Creator.
And that is one of, as you just said, our most highest rights. You're saying our right to privately contract, to privately form agreements with whoever we choose, and that there is to be no infringing on that right. I mean, that's protected in the Constitution, right? If one falls under the protections of the Constitution, which is not a U.S. citizen, right? U.S. citizens don't fall under the protection of the Constitution, but the right to contract is protected by it, yes?
The right to contract is what we would describe as an unalienable right, or an unalienable right. It is one of those rights that can't be given away, can't be contracted away. Mm-hmm. When we talk about unalienable rights, and we got into this in the last show, but for those who weren't with us, unalienable rights are endowed by the Creator. Okay, I mean, you have the right to
unalienable. I guess what I was just asking is that it's not given to us or won by the Constitution, but it is protected by it. Yes.
The Constitution converted our rights to something called inalienable rights or inalienable rights, and it doesn't address unalienable rights, but okay. Those same rights are held to be inalienable or inalienable, and that means that you could actually forego your rights and contract to exchange them for privileges and benefits or liberties instead of rights. And in fact, that's what's happened, because as the federal government has become more of a national government, and the 14th Amendment created the citizen, the U.S. citizen, the U.S. person. The Social Security Administration finished the deal by making it a banking entity. We've given up our rights, our inalienable rights, without even realizing that we traded them away in many cases, and without also realizing that if we wanted to go back and stand on the correct ground, we could actually be standing on unalienable rights, which you can't even contract away. So the Constitution protects some rights, but it also converted those rights from a higher form of right into a lower form of right without everyone noticing.
And that was from the Declaration of Independence to the Constitution, correct? Whereas the Declaration of Independence does state that we have certain unalienable rights.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It seems that when you're trying to break away from a country, it's preferable to stand on unalienable rights because they're God-given. But when you're trying to form a country and control people again, as the Constitution did, then the preference of the drafters of that was to call them inalienable rights, which means that they could be contracted away, and in fact, they have been.
Right. These are rights granted by government.
An interesting addition to that, just to clarify inalienable from unalienable, the UN right now is holding a court hearing on presenting the inalienable rights of Palestine back to them, meaning that they basically grant those rights. It's a set of rights that are granted separate of unalienable rights, and they're granted by way of a social contract.
Important distinction, easy to look over, but yet a very important distinction. This language of law, legalese, it's tricky sometimes.
A lot of modern legal dictionaries will call those two words synonyms. They'll say they're the same thing, but that is a bastardization over time. If you go back in time and look at what those words really mean, from historical dictionaries, you'll find the more accurate truth of it, and that's a very common thing that we see going on all over the place through the statutes and code and Black's Law Dictionary and the like, is that over time the words start to lose their meaning because the powers that be don't want you to realize the difference. So, we're supposed to think that unalienable and inalienable are the same, and they're not.
And that is a good example of what we do. We look to distinguish these terms, the terminologies, the understanding, the knowledge. We spend a lot of time distinguishing these factors so that we can truly understand what is taking place in our world presently, historically, and in the future, because we control what happens from here on.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. So get back to that more about what you do, what you offer in terms of your education, what you do in terms of your own study, like what are your focuses?
Yes. Well, major focus of what we teach happens to be, as we've been talking about, definitions. Definitely defining terms and understanding clearly what they are. Understanding clearly what our the distinction between rights and benefits and privileges, understanding clearly the difference between inalienable rights or unalienable rights, and perhaps the difference between corporations and private organizations, charters and wills and testaments. So we look to distinguish these factors so people can truly understand what power they have individually as a creator, from I am, or the powers that they hold when they've signed a social contract or they're operating underneath the Social Security or underneath the birth certificate or something of that nature. So we look to distinguish those items, and we look to educate individuals that are looking to understand those things so that they can better facilitate their needs for their legacy. And what we do then is we give them the power and the information that they need to create their own trusts, to provide for that legacy for their family, and to further themselves, and to take away that knowledge that they are not just the person, they are far greater than that.
Wonderful and very, very necessary in these times. And all, quote unquote seekers or freedom seekers or, people on some path of, engaging and entertaining the desire for freedom. Again, this is a very, very useful service and tools that you guys provide. Thank you for doing what you do.
Definitely. And I think something that sets us apart from the rest is that our material is all based, it's all based from the source. We have some form of source reference from everything that we are going to distinguish or speak of. So we have sources of reference for what we just spoke about, distinguishing those words. We have sources of reference for the jurisdictions and the venues and forums that these organizations reside in, and how to understand where they reside and how to create them. So we I hate to sound kind of abstract, but to get a little more specific, we give the information necessary for individuals to govern themselves and to govern their own legacy. Instead of relying on a charter or a state or an application to provide them with some form of information, we provide them with the information necessary to make their own decisions and to govern their family and their legacy by themselves. And it really sets us apart from the rest. Because we are not looking to just provide remedies in commerce. We're not looking to just provide debt solutions. In fact, we don't provide those things. We're looking to educate individuals to provide for themselves. And, those remedies, they only work some of the time.
Well, let's get into that. Well, before we get into that, Christian, did you want to add anything to what PJ was just saying about your particular style of services and offerings?
Sure. Our private trust education course is the cornerstone of what we offer. It's the place to start with us, and it's available on our website, GTEN.org. The idea is to provide to create a private express trust to operate from. Okay, and so then you're operating under unalienable rights and from the private, and then branch out from there into the public. That's instead of using the artificial person, the all caps name person that's assigned with your social security number. Instead of using that as your starting point, you use a private express trust as your starting point, because the all caps person draws everything into federal jurisdiction. So do corporations. Their corporate charters are under the federal jurisdiction from the get-go. Okay, so same with LLCs and limited partnerships and all of that. So of all of the vessels out there that you could choose to operate from, the private express trust is the only one that's airtight and keeps you in the private and keeps your business your own and doesn't share trusteeship with the federal government. Because as we covered on our last show, if you use that all caps name or a corporation, you're creating a trust for which the government is the trustee.
It can be termed as a trilateral contract as opposed to a bilateral contract, correct? 3 parties instead of 2 involved?
Yeah, well, there are 3 parties involved in a trust as well, but a private express trust, but it's you get to select the parties. Mm-hmm. So you've got then a vessel to operate from, and then you can, from there, you can create whatever you need to connect out into the public and do whatever you do. If you've got a health food store, that can be connected through to your private express trust. It doesn't come back to you. It doesn't come back to, or rather, it does come back to you through by way of the trust, but it doesn't come back to the person. So, once you set up a private express trust, you use that to create whatever else you need in life. Whether it be other trusts, one to hold your house, one to hold your car, one to, hold the capital interest of your business or whatever. And so no longer is it, predicated on the all caps name person. And without that all caps name person involved, and without a corporate entity involved, you don't have the jurisdiction issue, and you're free to operate the way you see fit, which allows people to actually, make progress on the things that need to get done on this planet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well said.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and then so maybe some people might be thinking, well, why wouldn't I want to fall under federal jurisdiction? What's wrong with that? Or maybe not what's wrong with that, but why are we considering, something else? And so I'll bring up this, short news story that's been floating around for a day or two, where, a baby was taken by Child Protection Services earlier in the month in California after his parents sought a second opinion regarding a medical condition. And he since has been returned to the custody of his mom and dad, but their ordeal with Child Protective Services is far from over. The child was seized in a dramatic home visit by police from his parents in Sacramento and placed in Child Protection Services custody after a seemingly benign disagreement between the parents and doctors at a local memorial hospital. So I bring this story up because this is a real life scenario that there's a lot of parents out there, a lot of people who have children. This may make this all of this that we're discussing more real and more relevant to our lives. So why is it that Child Protective Services was able to go in there and do it? Is it simply a government completely tyrannical, out of control, not recognizing what's lawful and what's not lawful? Or are they going there to take the child because they have some consent on the part of the parents to do so? Right? So why would we consider not being U.S. citizen, not being subject to federal jurisdiction? What's better? What's better about what you guys are studying, offering, making available for others?
Right. That's a great question, because it is timely. It's there's stuff like this going on in the news all the time. You could really point to almost any news story and pull some relevance out of it, but that one's particularly relevant. There's no quick fix to that situation, but there's a lot of understanding that can come out of it. The truth is that the baby, the title to the baby is owned by the government. Okay, when you have a license of any kind, that splits the title. License or registration of any kind splits the title. The marriage license gives the government jurisdiction over your marriage. You can't get a divorce without a judge allowing it, at least in the state of California and most states. You can't get a divorce without a judgment from a judge. That's because you're not in control of your own marriage. Okay? When the birth certificate is issued, the same thing basically occurs. You can't get a clear title of your baby anymore. It is split. That registration of the baby by the informant, the mother, has split the title of that baby, and now you have the usufruct. Okay, you have the use and enjoyment of that child, and you have the responsibility of raising and paying for all the expenses of that child. But the government has the legal title to that child. And the combination of the marriage license and the birth certificate is almost impenetrable. The government can come and take your baby at any time. Now they don't, because that would cause public outcry, right, in general. But they do have the right to interfere with your marriage and your family and take your baby if they see fit.
And that's because unknowingly, most likely, the parents gave them that right, by applying for the birth certificate, by applying for a social security number.
Correct.
Yeah, and by the marriage license itself.
By the marriage license, right, even before the children are.
Yeah, it actually pledges your future children to the government under split title.
Yes, yes. Just to add to that, in a marriage covenant, that's exactly what it is. They have the directions as to how your property will be managed and to how your kin will be, or to how your offspring will be managed. And that covenant is described right there. That marriage license has all those items, and the state is very clear as to who has title. So you're 100% right, Christian. That marriage license does definitely pledge those children to the state before they're even born.
Right. And so, like I said, what I said was no quick fix. I mean, actually, the only quick fix to that would have been a third component, which is even with these contracts in place, even with these split titles, the government still needs your consent on the spot at any point, whether it's being stopped at the roadside on a traffic violation or they come to take your children. Okay, they still are looking for consent in some way, and the only consent they need is that you need to consent to their jurisdiction. You need to, if they wanted to stop that at the doorway, they could have at least said not without a warrant. You're not taking my kids without a warrant. You're not even coming in here.
And just so we're clear, that was a warrantless kidnapping.
Right.
It was what they're describing that as, yeah.
Right.
So had the parents known to say that nobody's coming in the house without a warrant, signed by a judge, right? A warrant signed by a judge. There could have been a different outcome. The agents have not gained jurisdiction.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah, absolutely. If someone with a badge shows up at my door, what I do is I step outside and lock the door behind me.
Just to add to that, the gentleman that had this happen to him, they actually, once he stepped out of the house and closed the door, they attacked him and removed his keys from his pocket so that they could enter the home, just to be clear on this. So it's very interesting, some of the choices that we make. So, Christian, when you do that, do you bring your keys out with you? Do you bring any property out with you when you step out and lock the door behind you?
I don't bring keys and I don't bring identification.
Just you.
Just me. I empty my pockets, open the door, close the door, and lock the handle and close the door behind me, and then I say, "How can I help you?" So there are ways of handling it on the spot, and my point with that was that if they had known that they had the right to not let those people in, and they hadn't given the opportunity to let those people in, those people require consent from you. Now, if they have a warrant, then the warrant is based on the contractual consent going back to the birth certificate and the marriage license. Okay, so the warrant, it comes from the judge, and it is basically, court has already begun, and the judge has taken over the grantor's position in the constructive trust, and the judge is now taken your spot. Okay, but if they don't have a warrant, the people at the door don't have the right to make a legal determination of whether they're allowed to come in there unless you consent to let them in.
Correct.
And so you said you guys use source references. Where might one find the reference of the source for that an agent needs to have a warrant to enter a home, and people?
Well, you can look into Article 4, the Fourth Amendment. Fourth Amendment kind of covers that. It's an illegal search and seizure without a warrant. And they're basically removing property or entering a home or quartering troops. It's one or the other. It's in I believe it's Article 3, and Article 4 covers all of those items that have to do with home invasions and have to do with privacy issues. So the Third and Fourth Amendment.
Yeah, it's not Article 4.
I'm sorry.
You have certain rights, even under the weaker version of them, which is the Constitution. You have the inalienable rights to be secure in your person and effects. You have the right to personal liberty, to locomotion. You have the right to not have your property taken from you without due process of law. Due process clause of the Constitution is a very important part of the fix. Okay, if you use the Constitution for anything, it's for that. Because there wasn't due process there. Warrant might have been due process, but even that would be arguable. There was no due process when they came to take that child. And so all of that's on the spot. If you look back, though, at what could they have done differently from the beginning, ab initio, from the beginning, how could they have set their lives up differently so that just wasn't an option? And it could be done, and it definitely can be done. And the way it's done is, instead of a marriage license, which is giving trusteeship of the marriage trust to the government, you create your own private marriage trust. Okay, and from there, the trust will take care of the family members, whether together or in divorce. You can be married spiritually, under God, in front of your family and friends, and to each other, without the marriage license. The marriage license has only one purpose, and that purpose is to give control over to the government. So it goes back to what I was talking about before, is people need, that where we screw up is that we try to keep possession of things and we give away control in the process. And what we really want to be doing is the opposite. We want to be making sure that we have control of the situations in our lives, and we don't try to own anything. Just control it.
Yeah. Well, we, struck upon this, well, at least it was a revelation for me in a way. We talked about this on part 1 last week, where I see clearly that I cannot own anything. And I use the example of death, when I expire, when this body expires, nothing can come with me. Literally, nothing can come with me. So I technically cannot own anything. It just doesn't, it's just a way of it. So, that's very clear to me. And so this trusteeship that we're talking about is the very essence of that, of being in control, but not owning, which you can't anyway. So it's it's a lifestyle much more closer to reality, is what I think.
Right. And it's much more honest, because to say that, you own something when really it's all God's property, we're just borrowing it, right? We just have a usufruct on this land and the things upon it, including this body, this body that I run around in.
Just the trustees of this body, yeah.
Just the trustees of the body, right?
So it's a much truer and more honest way of looking at the whole scenario, and if you want to, we didn't invent it, God did, you could say, or whatever you want to call that, but the system itself recognizes it as well. The Lieber Code, which is at Lincoln's Order 100, describes the usufruct and the military occupation of this nation, and it has become the blueprint for controlling the world, and The Hague accepted it. I believe it's Article 55, the Hague Convention, and so it is what's in place. It is a usufruct, and the question is, who's the usufructuary? Who's the person that has the use and the responsibility for paying the bills and taxes? And, so if you start to really look at the system and how it is actually structured and constructed, ownership's not really part of it. Nobody owns anything, and they know it. Okay,
it's more
at least
of a myth.
Ownership is a myth, and it is used to make people give up control. So wouldn't you rather be in control and just accept that you don't own anything? If you control a large, mass of wealth, for example, what do you care who owns it?
Right, you're using it regardless. Well,
right.
If that's what your private trust contract, entails, if you're using it, then you get to use it. What more do you want? What more does anybody want?
Yeah.
Can't take
in the Private Express Trust, you get to give it all away on paper to show that you don't own it. And yet, the trustee controls it, and depending on how the trust indenture is worded, the trustee can control it absolutely. The trustee can have 100% control, or the board of trustees can have 100% control of it if that's the way your indenture is worded, and that's what we teach, is how, why give control to anyone else? Why give jurisdiction to anyone else? Why give anyone else a hand in it at all? Just, when you can have a group of trustees that are, smart, capable people and know what's up and want to do something for the world and want their families taken care of at the same time and whatever, and you band together to form a private express trust for all those purposes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, we're all aware that the United States is operating right now as our trustee. If we had the ability to choose our trustee, I believe that many of us would have different choices we would make every day in our actions in life, and it would be based on our own interest, our own personal property, and of course the public, the benefit of the individuals around us. And I think that's a very powerful place to be, is to be in complete control, not in ownership, which is, as we were talking about, a complete myth, but in complete control. And the title is held, in a place that is secure, and it can be it can be challenged at any time, and most times it can be dismissed for lack of personal jurisdiction. So the property is safe. It is within the safety and the security of the trustee, and there's no previous document or underlying presumption of law or jurisdiction that can change that.
And that's
can change the. You mean you're referring to the private express trust? Nothing can penetrate that. You're saying.
If drawn correctly and kept out of minimum contacts, it is impenetrable.
Very cool. That's a beautiful thing.
And to your question, you asked a bit ago, why wouldn't we want the federal government being the trustee or whatever? We're in a position to choose. Once you realize you can operate from the private and choose your own trustee, you're also in a position to choose the jurisdiction. And personally, I'd like to be operating under the unalienable rights that I gained from the Creator and the sort of maxims of law that go with that, rather than the motor vehicle code or the tax code or the the criminal code or whatever. I'm not looking to do anything that is that would hurt society.
It sounds like what you're saying, Christian, is the laws of God are far greater than the laws of man.
Exactly. So if you can choose your own jurisdiction and your own set of rules, and you can, why wouldn't you, unless you don't know any better?
Well, let's bring it back to this topic
and once again, and a lot of people might think impossible because, they may think this government is just out of control and, that they don't care about your rights. What would you say to that? I mean,
they don't care about your rights. This government has taken your rights away, or you have pledged your rights away and exchanged them for benefits and privileges. Your rights are gone unless you know how to stand on them.
Well, if we bring back
how to do that, yeah.
That's right. If we bring back to the point of the child earlier, we talk about the issue of being ward of the state. When an entity believes that they can do better than you can as a child, or when a doctor believes that his pompous opinion is better than your humble want to go and get a second opinion, and his frustration leads him to call an entity that has been put in place for whistleblowers to ensure that parents are doing the right thing. So there's a lot of bureaucracy that takes place in that incident. But the real thing that happened there is that they were at the whim by way of contract. They contracted with the birth certificate, with the Social Security, with the marriage license, and I bet you they also contracted there in person with the hospital. And, in reading that article, I believe the major issue that the doctor had an issue with was they claimed that it was because they didn't properly discharge from the hospital, meaning that they signed a contract and they reneged on it in some way. I'm not 100% sure. So the doctor, being frustrated, contacted CPS. Now, it's a pretty arrogant thing for a doctor to put a family in that position, especially after they had gotten a second opinion from another doctor. But the fact remains that the ward of the state is what we're talking about here. If the government feels that you're not doing a good enough job, or that now what's happening in between that, okay, we'll just stop there for a moment. In between that is a subset of actions that are taking place, personal interests, certain individuals that are holding private interests for personal gain. For example, that doctor was looking to perform heart surgery on that child, which is why they took that child out of that hospital to get a second opinion. If he had performed a heart surgery on that child, that is over a $100,000 operation. You can guarantee he was going to get a nice percentage of that for performing that operation successfully. Them taking that child out of there literally took money out of his hands. When we research even births in hospitals, you'll see the financial gain that comes from certain decisions that these doctors make, and we're leaving our protection of our children in the hands of a government that then leaves it in the hands of private interests for their gain. and what they choose at the moment goes. And that's why this incident took place. Even though it was wrong and, the child would be placed back in the hands of the parents, the fact remains that it happened. Now, the moment that something happened there at the homestead where the police showed up, there was obviously a call and they had some reasoning to be there. They didn't have a warrant, and based on probable cause they would be able to enter, but because they didn't have a warrant, they had to rely on the consent of the parents, as Christian brought up earlier. So there are several factors that take place here all throughout this incident that can not necessarily be prevented from the get-go, but there are several instances that it can be halted or that it can be renegotiated to the benefit of the person that's having this happen to them, or the benefit of the child. And I think the private express. I'm sorry to interrupt,
I was just going to say, in your opinion, what would you think is the best course of action for the parents now? If it was your situation, if you were in their shoes, and let's say you just came to your attention that you could have a private express trust. I mean, whatever. What would you do? I
would immediately educate myself. That's my first thing, is I would immediately educate myself. You see, they have a lawyer now that's telling them about unlawful entry, that's telling them about all of these different things that have happened, and I'm sure they're being educated greatly right now. So that's the first thing that takes place, is education is paramount. That happens very fast. The next step is to understand what powers you do and don't have and what you've created for yourself. And once you truly understand what contracts you've created, you can understand how to either let them sit and use a different entity or to use those to your advantage. In our business, what we're looking to, educate individuals doing what we do is helping individuals to find that they have a separate entity, that they don't have to touch that. They can leave that all intact.
When you say that, you mean the name? What's that?
I mean the marriage license, the birth certificate, the Social Security, all of those contracts that are already existed under, and the presumption of law that exists by those contracts for the officers to operate the way that they did, for the doctor to operate the way that he did. All of those things are based on presumption of law. Am I right, Christian?
Yes.
So, with that said, the Private Express Trust has none of those attachments. It is outside of that jurisdiction because it is drawn under private contract between two parties, a grantor and a trustee, for the benefit of a third, a beneficiary. So after educating themselves well, of course I would recommend that they took a look at some of our work too, so that they could better understand the Private Express Trust. And, the way, as Christian had said earlier, that we like to derive ourselves from divine law and the maxims of law derived therefrom, and natural law and the maxims of law derived therefrom. Anything past that is a fiction to some extent. So, to educate those individuals, to continue answering your question though, those individuals need to educate themselves to the point where they fully understand what powers they have as creators, and know how to create a contract that can protect their assets, their property, limit their liability, and afford them to have a legacy for the family that they're going to create in the future, without the worries of probate, without the worries of wards of the state, without the worries of any of those items. So.
The good news here...
Yeah, Christian, go ahead.
The good news here is that while it may sound confusing, we've laid it all out. We've created the coursework for those who are interested. So it's not as daunting as it might sound.
We're trying to cram 50 hours worth of work into a 2-hour show.
Yeah.
Well, and it's not this kind of information strikes everyone differently, right? And some people will just say, "Oh, those guys are crazy. They can't do that." The other people will say, "Oh, I can do that tomorrow." The truth is, it's always somewhere. It's somewhere in the middle. And what I'm saying is, yeah, you can do it, and it takes a little investment of your time and energy to learn how to do it. But once you do set your life up correctly, well, that's maybe more judgment than I should say. Once you set your life up in the way that we're describing, that can't occur. Because here's what happens if you have a marriage trust and you have a patent of nativity instead of a birth certificate. and these things are done privately, and, the parents are trustees over the child, and the child goes to the hospital. Either parent, as trustee, can speak on behalf of the child, and it's up to nobody else, what kind of medical care that child's going to get. And if you decide you want to leave the hospital, that's nobody else's business. And if somebody comes to the door knocking, you ask to see their claim. What claim do you have? Where's your warrant? What claim do you have on this child? And when the what are they called? The Child Protective Services goes to try to get a warrant, if they go that far, which I don't know that they would, but if they did try to go get a warrant so they could come back, the judge would say, I can't issue a warrant on that child. We don't have split title on that child. We don't have any jurisdiction over that child, nor do we have jurisdiction over those parents, as far as we can tell. And so, there it is. So if you take the control into your own hands and learn how to do it privately and notice that out into the public the right way without entering public jurisdiction, then you're in control. You're not splitting the duties of administration of the trust with the state or the federal government.
And since a right cannot be converted into a crime, you're not doing anything that's wrong. You've done nothing by avoiding getting a birth certificate or avoiding getting a social security card. It's all voluntary. All of those items are voluntary. Even a driver's license is voluntary. In our right to travel course, we cover clearly what personal liberties are, what rights that you have, the rights of locomotion, and it's important.
Uh-oh.
PJ.
Still here. Don't worry. It's just a second.
So I was going to be like last time.
No worries. We're here. So, with that said, I'll end there, but, forgive me. I lost my place there.
That's okay. The question you asked earlier is, where can you go to find these things? What can you point us to the code or whatever that says, and I don't remember what particularly that question was asked about, but I want to give you a general answer to that would serve everyone well who's listening. And that is, you want to look to foundational documents always, not to what somebody else said that's just hearsay. Okay? And almost everything that you need to know about how your constitutional rights or your constitutionally protected rights, those are the inalienable variety, play out, can be found in Supreme Court decisions. And that's a great place to look. The code is not a great place to look. The code is an extension of legislation. It comes from Congress. Then, the statutes are passed, and then the code is colorably derived from the statutes, and it doesn't even match the statutes. And so by the time you get to what does the code say, well, the code says whatever the government wants you to believe. Mm-hmm. Okay? Whereas Supreme Court decisions are just that. They're decisions on these matters. And, the right Supreme Court decisions can give you a really good idea of what your rights are under the Constitution. Now, even those are a fiction, as PJ was talking about. Go back a little further, and it's just what is right, what is natural law, what is divine law, what is true in nature. Is this true? I think
there's Supreme Court decisions that would back natural law.
Sure, there are Supreme Court.
Yeah.
There are, and they're really they only have the charge of backing the organic laws, okay, and those are derived. Those are the laws that came about in the formation of the country, okay. So you've got the Declaration of Independence, you've got the Northwest Accords, you've got the Constitution. These foundational documents are called the organic laws, and the an Article 3 court, which is a federal court derived under Article 3 of the Constitution, has the obligation to look to those organic laws and the rights contained there, not contained, the rights protected thereunder, to do the right thing. Okay, they can't just look at the code in an Article 3 court. Now, unfortunately, most of the courts in this country are Article 1 courts, which are really an extension of the legislature and have nothing to do with the judicial branch, or very little to do with it. And they're just carrying out the code. They're carrying out the statutes in Article 1 court. So, Supreme Court is an Article 3 court. They're looking at rights. And if you want the best place to look to see what your rights are in terms of the Constitution and the other organic laws, that's a great place to look. That'll tell you what.
But why would we care about the Constitution, right? Because all it does is protect then our inalienable rights, which can be granted or taken away by government. So what? I know we want to look at source reference material, right? Constitution would probably be one of those.
Well, remember
that,
here.
But why, at the same token, why would we care if it doesn't apply in the private?
You want to remember here, Siobhan, that the Constitution does not give the rights that it describes. It only protects those that are already established. So that it's not that we rely on the Constitution for our rights. Our rights are endowed. The Constitution is one of the documents that has recognized that these are rights for all people. We hold these truths to be self-evident. It's very clear what goes on there. And the reason what we need to know the difference between an Article 3 and an Article 1 court is your Article 3 court is the judiciary. It is the judicial body that controls the constitutional choices the constitutional adjudications that we have. So it is a constitutional court. It determines, like Christian said, the adjudication of the original body of law, whereas the Article 1 court is a legislative court. It is a court that handles political affairs through legislation. The judiciary cannot even render a decision because it is a violation of the separation of powers. So what we're talking about here is we're talking about the legislation has, since the 13th and 14th Amendment, have sidestepped the judiciary and have operated solely under the legislation. Now, why is this important? Because the private express trust that is created under certain jurisdictions, but it can operate under other jurisdictions. It forms what's known as a natural person, and a natural person does have certain rights on the land, same as what this Constitution is describing. And when you are enacting a will and testament, the trustee literally is empowered by the settlor to do for a beneficiary of his choosing what he may do for himself. And so it's literally passing the power, the unalienable right of power, to the trustee to allow him to act as a natural person, as whatever, if he needs to operate as a Article 4 citizen or I'm sorry, not an Article 4 citizen, but a Fourth Amendment citizen as opposed to a 14th Amendment citizen. These things can happen. But we haven't gotten into this yet because we haven't talked about the exposure of the trust to certain laws or to certain jurisdictions. We haven't spoken about minimum contacts, and we haven't spoken about the interfacing instruments that we use with this trust to operate in public. So there's many, many things that we need to understand, and we don't just throw away any situation because we believe that we're not under that jurisdiction. It's better to know what it is so that you can know whether you are or are not under that jurisdiction. So,
got it, yeah. That makes then perfect sense to why we'd want to familiarize ourselves with it. PJ, did we lose you?
No, I'm still here.
Okay.
That's the end of my thought for the moment.
Christian, anything on your end? Any thoughts coming to mind?
No, I'm good. Do you have another question for us? I'm ready to move on from that one.
Okay, well, you talked about now, and let me just ask real quick, I wrote it down. PJ, when you talk about Article 3 courts with this, an original body of law being recognized there, would that comprise the common law?
So the common law is a form of law, okay, and it goes back to England.
I'm so sorry, I was muted, you guys. Go ahead.
It goes back to Old English common law, and common law just basically means that it's law that's determined by court decisions. Okay, as opposed to statute. Okay, it's alive. It exists. It is real, and it is a derivative of divine law, because it's basically the court's interpretation of what's true under natural or divine law. The issue with common law is that it's getting harder and harder to stand on in this country, because the statutes have declared that the common law only applies when there's no code that overrides it. And the code and statute are to be followed unless they're inadequate, and then you revert to the common law. And so that causes lawyers and even some judges to say that the common law has been abolished in this country, which is absolutely not the case. But it gets to be rather difficult to enlighten the judge and the opposing attorney if you're standing in court.
What about with regards to the private express trust? I was under the understanding that is governed under the common law.
Well, it sort of
and
is.
private contract.
It's actually governed under equity. It exists under common law.
Okay.
That might be too complicated a topic to get into very deeply here. But in general, our private express trust structures are governed wherever we say they are. So the jurisdiction and the law form are chosen at the time the indenture is signed. Okay, and my preference is for an indenture that is the trust agreement, right? That is formed under divine law and the maxims of law derived therefrom, and equity and the maxims of equity derived therefrom, and everything else is irrelevant. And that gets you in truth and fairness. Okay, it's what's true under divine law and what's fair between the parties. Because all the rest of it, I don't care about.
And just to clarify the question that you had asked, Siobhan, about what the Article 3 court does. Article 3 tribunal is very simple. It's Article 3 of the Constitution establishes the judiciary. Okay, so it's literally the judicial branch of our government. We have our executive, our legislative, and our judicial branch. And there's a separation of powers clause that keeps those branches of government separate so that they can maintain checks and balances over each other. Okay, this is the stuff we learned in like 5th grade. Your Article 1 tribunal, okay, is a court set up by Congress to review agency decisions, military courts, martial appeals courts, ancillary courts with judges appointed by Article 3 appeals courts, or administrative agencies. In other words, how do I describe this? The tribunals, as created by Congress, and I'm reading this out of Wiki for a second, are of various forms and have differing levels of independence from the executive and legislative branches, meaning that these courts are governed only under the executive or legislative branches deriving, wherever they're being derived from at the time, mostly coming directly from legislation, meaning that we are... At one time, we had these 3 branches operating with each other in concert. And there came a point where half of our union decided they wanted to keep slavery and not pay the bills of the debt that was taking place. So the other half decided to usurp that lower half and form martial law. And they, through that legislation, formed an enforcement of legislation clause through legislation that allowed the Article 1 court to enact military decision to force the southern states to pay their debt and to not secede, to actually repeal their secession. So the Article 1 tribunal continued from that point, enforcing legislation, meaning that all forms of legislation that we operate now, the codification, everything comes from legislation. The judiciary has no more power in those items taking place. So the Article 1 court is the only court that's operating right now. It's literally a tax court. It's a court that handles the legislation. It does not handle the Constitution. And when you go to challenge something, you're saying, oh, well, that's a violation of my constitutional rights. It can't even be seen in that court because it's a violation of the separation of powers. And that's why most people, like yourself probably, when you went into an Article 1 court claiming you were, Constitution or claiming there's something, they said, it doesn't apply here, I'm sorry. And that happens often. And I'm getting off on a tangent, I'm not being specific, but the point is that there is a distinction between those two. There's a big distinction between those two. There's legislation and then there's the judiciary. So.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you expanding on that.
And on your question, Siobhan, as to why do we care about what the Constitution, what the Supreme Court decisions are, if you form your private express trust in a jurisdiction that excludes, the federal government, then someone sues you in federal court, you get it dismissed for lack of jurisdiction. Okay, so we don't care what they think.
Okay. Right.
Okay. Going the other way, though, what if you need to sue or go after in some way someone that's within the system that wronged you? Right now I'm involved in a large lawsuit. Gentleman that came to my attention needed help because his constitutionally protected rights had been violated up, down, and sideways by some police officers. And the solution to that is to convene an Article 3 court, federal court, and hold those people accountable to your rights. So, there are times when you really want to know what those rights are. And in general, standing on those rights, as opposed to trying to decipher the code, is going to leave you in a better position. because the Supreme Court decisions are there to back it, right?
And you'll know how to enact an Article 3 court as opposed to walking into a tax court and not getting remedy.
Well, that's what I mean. So, they don't hang signs out on the doors of the courthouse, Article 1
sure
court,
don't.
Article 3 court. So is that then up to us to invoke that jurisdiction in any court we might find ourselves in, or
yes.
Is there? Okay.
Yeah, you have to call it into being, and then you have to stand on it and not let it slip back into Article 1, because the system is designed to turn everything into an Article 1 tribunal. Mm-hmm. So if you allow the discussion to be about statutes, it will be an Article 1 court, because statutes and rights are oil and water. You can have one or the other. Okay, so either you're operating under benefits and privileges under the statute and code, or you're operating under rights under the organic laws. And you can't do both. They don't mix. So that's the truth of it.
And Christian, as you said, it needs to be invoked, right? Meaning you need to bring the claim in that venue, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So if the claim is
how does one invoke? How does one invoke? What would you say to that? How would you explain?
Court, and it's not easy. It's.
Do you wear the Title IV flag? Do you carry a Title IV flag in with you to show what jurisdiction you're operating in? I know some people do that.
Christian, do you want to tell your story?
No, that.
I don't blame you.
I'm not even sure which one you're referring to. But,
there's a lot of them, right?
So long as no is the answer, right?
Whichever one you're talking about, no is the answer.
Oh, come on! You'll have to tell me behind the scenes. I want to know.
We actually tell it in one of our series. If you sign up to our Private Express Trust series, you will get that story.
Okay, good. I'm already there.
The one where you actually enacted an Article 3 court.
Oh yeah. Well, so what I did with that was I actually got rid of the case altogether by private contract, and it was that case was gone by the time we went into the courtroom, and the judge was kind enough to recognize the flag of jurisdiction on my paperwork and change the flag on the standard, both of them, the California flag and the United States flag, changed to get rid of the gold fringe and get the right dimensions. So there was a Title IV flag on the standard behind the judge when we came back after the break. Brand new, out of the box, creased, bright red, blue and white.
Wow.
It was great.
So you had invoked that jurisdiction, and what jurisdiction are we talking about? We're talking about constitutional?
Article 3 court.
Okay, so that's constitutional, right? That recognizes rights.
It is a court that recognizes rights. It's not necessarily
a court that recognizes rights.
But it is a court that recognizes rights protected under the Constitution, and in fact has an obligation to compare the circumstances and facts of the case with the rights of protected under the organic laws.
And this is so wild. I mean, this is where it's like, sorry, this is just kind of like where it gets almost like magical, if you will, like word magic and symbolism, because I mean that you literally call into being a particular, jurisdiction or custom or way to go about this whole thing, right?
Yep.
And, you do that by your act of, placing the flag on your paperwork or however else you did it. And then the court recognizes that invocation and then modifies its own self to be able to see, right, this jurisdiction. It places the same flag, gets rid of the gold fringe flag, and now it's placing this, was it a Title IV flag?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, 1 by 1.9 flag.
It's your civilian flag, yeah.
Civilian.
And so in that case, the way I did it, and it's harder to do it as a defendant. I mean, as a plaintiff, you just convene an Article 3 court. Okay, and there's language that would help you do that, but it's
so it's invoked in your plea, is what you're saying then? As soon as
it's in the charging instrument or the original court claim, the summons and complaint, right? As a defendant, the problem is that there's all this gobbledygook already in the case because the plaintiff has no doubt thrown all kinds of statutes and codes at you in the complaint. So it's already an Article 1 court from the get-go. Okay? And to convert that to an Article 3 can be rather difficult compared to being a plaintiff. And so in that case, what I did was I treated the original charging instrument as commercial paper that it is, and endorsed it for deposit with the United States Treasury and vacated the case. And then I wrote a private correspondence to the judge letting him know what I did, and that if he could show me that we could proceed under Article 3 and get a fair shake, then I would be willing to do that. Otherwise, I'm just going to give him instruction as the person entitled to enforce the instrument and just vacate the case. And he gave me a very, very fair hearing in that courtroom that day. It was an excellent result on a case that had been going on for a long time and had terrible results up to that point.
Wow, that's great. Congratulations. It must feel good, I'm still, I'm still working on getting to that place of being able to resolve a situation I'm dealing with where I actually have success. But I'll get there. But it's inspirational to hear about your experience.
It takes time, it takes knowledge, and it takes dedication, and definitely an enthusiasm in what you're reading about. And I think that's something that we really bring to the table, is we bring a new format of enthusiasm to this work and to this information, where we like to make it a bit entertaining. We like to enjoy ourselves in this. And when you sign up to be a part of our membership, you can feel that immediately upon you're entering our private member portal. It's there's just a great sense of just design and a great sense of feeling when you get there. It's just for you. It's just for the member. You have access to all of the source documents that we've been talking about, the source and reference documents we've been talking about. Everything is up in the Red Library, and you have access to watch all of these series at your own pace, meaning that you don't have to feel overwhelmed. You don't have to feel like, oh my gosh, this is so much. And I'm sure a few people on this call are feeling, like this is a lot. This is so much going on right now.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
We've broken it down into 5 separate parts to allow individuals to really capacitate what we're teaching. And we've broken it down in a way that is very clear and very understandable. We start from history and we end up in the present day mechanics and how to do things. And, we have some great source material on that. The next 3 courses that we're, about to set up are extensions of those, and it's really wonderful. We have some great offerings right now. So,
all right, well, we'll get more into that and some other things that I wanted to touch on with you guys. We're actually going to go to break. Hey, Dave, are you there? I wanted to see if we have any extra time.
You have
longer than 2
as
hours.
much time as you need.
You're saying we can go over 2 hours, Sonny, if that should happen, if
that
all
should
parties
happen, you can go 3 hours.
Okay, good
that
to know.
might be more time than I need. We'll see.
That's more time than we need. Thank you, Dave.
Yeah. All right, so everybody, thanks for being tuned in tonight. We've been talking to PJ and Christian from Global Trust Education Network, getting an array of important information. So we're going to go to break, take a few minutes to kind of maybe stretch out and breathe a little bit and just kind of absorb everything you just heard. And we'll come back and talk more, get ready to absorb more. And I'm sure Dave's going to play a nice song for us, and we will be right back.
You're listening to Wolf Spirit Radio.